I'm Ethan, and I'll be reading Chapter 7 of The Mouse and the Motorcycle. From his position under the bed, Ralph watched the tank of the vacuum cleaner being dragged in front of the hall and listened into the clash and clang of the attachments. As the maid connected from a long metal tube to the nozzle at the end of the hose, he fastened a carpet cleaning part to the end of the tube. He heard her humming to herself as she plugged into the deadly machine and began to work it to the back and forth across the carpet. "It's nice, she's so happy," though Ralph bitterly as he watched the hungry machine devour dust and lint that lay in its path. The maid's feet in the white sneakers moved across the room until, without bothering to bend over to see where she was cleaning, she shoved the attachment under the bed. It slid closer and closer to Ralph. To be on the safe side, he pushed the motorcycle farther from the reach of the machine, but he dared not take his eyes off the attachment for even an instant. He shuddered as he watched it gobble the dust mouse, but even as he shuddered, he was fascinated by the power of the motor. The maid began to sing, "I give you a paper of pins, for that's the way my love begins." The attachment fell off the end of the long tube, but the maid, whose thoughts were elsewhere, did not notice. Now Ralph could feel the machine suck in its breath, and he knew he was in danger of being inhaled as long as the dust mice. Recklessly, the maid pushed the open end of the tube back and forth in any old way. There was no guessing which it would say would go next. Ralph had to turn the motorcycle to avoid that terrifying hole at the end of the tube. He ran to the right and he ran to the left, and still the maid pushed the tube around on where the attachment had fallen off. Suddenly, the maid threw down the tube but did not turn off the motor. The tube landed with a bump and a bounce, and before Ralph realized what was happening, the awful machine had inhaled his tail, and he had felt himself pulled in by the suction across the carpet. "Help!" he could not keep from squeaking, but no one heard him above the roar of the machine. He managed to catch the rear wheel of the motorcycle as he was sucked along the carpet. He hung on all his strength. The machine, which was strong enough to suck up a mouse, was not strong enough to suck up a mouse with the motorcycle. Ralph lay there on his stomach, hanging for dear life, feeling his whiskers of fur swept back toward the machine. From this position on his stomach, Ralph could see a girl standing in front of the dresser. She was smiling at herself in the mirror, arranging her hair, dreaming, no doubt, of a busy boy. Ralph despaired. There was no telling how long she would stand there in this silly way. With the vacuum cleaner motor making so much noise, the housekeeper was sure to think she was busy working. Ralph felt his paws beginning to slip and did not know how much longer he could hold out against the machine. He had to go think of something and think of it fast. With every bit of strength he had left in his body, he clung to the wheels of the motorcycle and with his left paw while he moved his right paw to the exhaust pipe. If he could just manage to pull himself along until he could get on the motorcycle, bit by bit, hand over hand, Ralph dragged himself along the exhaust pipe, and he knew he was making progress, but he could see the part of his tail once more. He reached back and yanked his tail out from the tube to have it sucked. Again, Ralph was far from being out of danger. "I'll give you the keys to my heart," the maid sang to herself before the mirror, now pulling her hair behind her ears, now pulling it to the top of her head, obliviously to desperate struggling under the bed. Once Ralph's paw slipped from the exhaust pipe, and he thought he was a goner, until he thought the rear wheel at the time saved himself. Slowly he moved forward until his entire tail was free. Things were easier. Then he could brace his hind foot against the spokes from the rear wheel. Slowly he rose, clinging to the machine until he was able to grasp the handle grips and throw his leg over the seat. Ralph felt considerably safer sitting on it. the motorcycle, and very much pleased with himself and having outwitted the vacuum cleaner. He was quite sure by now that the maid never bothered to look under the bed. He tried to move forward, propelling the cycle with his feet, but he found the suction from the motor behind him was too strong. This made him wonder if the motor on Keith's cycle was stronger than the pull of the machine behind him. The more Ralph thought about it, the more important it seemed to him to find out. No, I won't. Yes, I will, Ralph argued with himself. I had promised not to ride it in the daytime. Yes, but Keith did not know how much the chance would see was a stronger motorcycle or a vacuum cleaner. Keith would be interested, wouldn't he? Would anybody? Riding the motorcycle would not be reckless. It would be an important experiment. Motorcycle versus vacuum cleaner. Which would win? Ralph had to find out. The maid turned abruptly in the mirror. Her feet and sneakers moved across the floor toward the electric outlet. If she disconnected the vacuum cleaner, there would be no experiment. Ralph was going to the pit one more motorcycle against the other. He had to do it now. He would never have another chance. Ralph picked up his tail and started the motor without taking time to let it warm up. He gunned it with all the breath he could even inhale. The motorcycle got off to a faster start than Ralph expected, so faster that Ralph lost control. He shot out from under the bed just as the vacuum cleaner died with long drawn outgroan. Suddenly everything went white, and Ralph found himself bumping along Stranglego's place, all white and made of cloth, and seemed to be closing in on him. From every direction, Ralph had ridden straight into a pillowcase. Threw on the heap of laundry, and the maid had dropped on the floor. Opening the pillowcase, he had fallen shut behind him. Ralph had no idea which way it was out. He dismounted from the motorcycle and beat the cloth with his fists, but everywhere he struck, it was soft and yielding. He stamped his feet, only to have cloth give him softly but silently beneath him. He began to wade through the pillowcase, tugging the motorcycle along behind him. While he wondered why he had thought it was so important to test the motorcycle against the vacuum cleaner. The light was dim. He sank to his knees in the bed, lined with him every step. When he came to the seam, he knew he had been waiting in the wrong direction. Drat, muttered Ralph. He turned, still dragging the motorcycle, and tried to retrace his footsteps, only to find he had no idea which way he had come from. There were no landmarks, no clouds, no cloth, no white, billowy, and yielding in all directions. Double drat, he stamped his feet, only to find himself sinking deeper into the linen. From the swishing sound he could hear outside, Ralph knew the maid must be unfolding the clean sheets over the bed. He puddled on, dragging the motorcycle without one direction, and with very little hope. He promised to buy me a bunch of blue ribbons, and sang the maid to tie up my bonny brown hair. Down the hall, and the door opened. Ralph heard a muffled woof, and in the moment he clicked a small dog's toenails on the bare floor at the edge of the hall carpet, followed by sniffing that was dangerously close. The little terror began to bark. I know you're in there, he yipped. Stuck out your tongue and waggled your fingers at me. Will you? Just wait. Paws began to scrape at the sheets and pillowcases as if the dog were trying to dig a hole. Ralph decided it was wiser not to talk back to the dog. He huddled secretly beneath against the motorcycle. Well, hello, you cute little thing, said the maid, revealing to Ralph, and she was even sillier than he had thought. As if there was anything cute about the terrier that could scarcely see through his own hair. The dog went on yapping a bit self-consciously. Ralph thought, now that he knew he was being admired by the maid, and man steps came thumping down the hall. Stop your racket, you pestry mutt, said the owner's voice, and Ralph knew when the bark suddenly came from above him that the dog had been snatched up "Let me down and I'll dig him out," yapped the dog as he was carried away. "Just let me down for 1 minute, I'll show you." Suddenly Ralph felt himself being tumbled about in the pillowcases. He did not even have to blink what to do. Automatically grabbed for the motorcycle and held on to it with all his strength. Even though he had been tipped upside down with his feet in the air, Ralph knew he was being lifted inside the bundle of bed linen and carried down the hall. He laid still, his front paws locked around the front wheel of the motorcycle. Waiting to see what happened next, the maid walked a short distance to what Ralph judged to be the linen room, and there she dumped her armload of bedding before went to clean another room. Ralph was deep in the hamper where no light filtered through at all. The sheets and pillowcases were on their way to the laundry, and since he had no wish to be laundered any way more than he wished to be thrown out with the trash, there was only one thing for him to do: start chewing. Ripped Ralph through the pillowcases, his sharp teeth, and in no time he had made a ragged hole, which he had crawled through and tried to pull the motorcycle after him. He discovered that the hole was too small and had to stop and chew bigger before he could pull the machine along with him. Ralph chewed through another layer of cloth, and then another. He has worked his way upward. Each time enlarging the hole for the motorcycle, his jaws began to ache, and still another layer of cloth lay ahead. This time a damp bath towel, which would make his slow chewing. Ralph was forced to make a decision. Did he want to save his life, or did he carry it off to the laundry with the motorcycle? There was only one answer. He wanted to save his life. He abandoned the motorcycle. With aching jaws, Ralph chewed upward and upward, moving faster now that he was making a mouse-sized hole instead of a motorcycle-sized hole. The bath towel had left an unpleasant, furry taste in his mouth. Gradually, light began to filter through the cloth until finally, when Ralph thought he could not force his jaws to close one more mouthful of fiber, he emerged into daylight at the top of the hamper. "Whew!" Ralph gasped, rubbing his jaws and wading across the sheets to the edge of the hamper. He leaped slightly to the floor, hugging the baseboard, scurried down the hall to room 215, where he flattened himself and squeezed under the door, safe but exhausted and filled with remorse at the loss of Keith's motorcycle. Ralph dragged himself off to the mouse hole to catch up on sleep he should have had that day.